Welcome back, everyone. I hope that you had a great winter break and that you got to relax and you're feeling refreshed and you're ready for our new semester. For today's Outside the Box episode, I wanted to review something that we've talked about a little bit before, and I wanted to just give you some more ideas about it. So today we're going to talk about using stations activities in your classroom. With our stations activities, you can use it to introduce a new topic or to review a topic that you've been working on. Your students can work in small groups for a shorter period of time, maybe 10 to 15 minutes, to work on tasks that are associated with the topic that they're already learning about. This gives our students an opportunity to experience a variety of resources in different formats that really helps us meet the needs of our different learning styles, and it's really just fast-paced enough to keep our students interested and moving around. I usually time my stations to last between 10 and 15 minutes per station. If I'm reviewing a topic, usually 10 minutes is fine. If I'm introducing new content, I try to do 15 minutes. I try to include a lot of different types of activities whenever I plan stations, just to keep it interesting and keep the students focused. This ranges from social media style activities, review questions, writing prompts, vocabulary review, opinion activities, and I also try to always include some sort of creative component because that's just what I like to do, and a lot of the students are creative and enjoy those activities too. Social media style activities can be either the creation of a profile or a Snapchat or Instagram style story. Whenever we do profiles, I have students create a profile of an important person and give them a list of people to choose from, no more than 8 people. So this works really well in social studies, and it would also work really well for English classes where you could let them choose a character. You could also do this in science with scientists or with different organisms. And for the Snapchat or Instagram stories, they can create stories based on the people, places, or events that you're learning about. And again, just like with the profiles, I like to give them a set list that they can choose from, and then they create a set of stories that would appear on that person or event's social media page. So they kind of show that they know what happened surrounding that person or that event. Review question activities are basically just like it sounds. It's just review questions. So this can be about facts. So it can have a definite right or wrong answer and can involve them just reciting facts and information and showing that they've retained that information. Or it can be a more complex style question that reviews the topics that they've been learning about and actually forces them to go over the information in their head and form an answer that's not necessarily yes, no, or a specific date. This could be cause and effect statements, if-then statements, or compare and contrast activities. Writing prompt activities can be used in a lot of different ways. You can have fact-based questions where you present students with a question that has a definite correct answer, and then you can require them to provide information that they learned in the class or through supplemental materials to support their answer and how they know that that's the answer. You can also do opinion-based questions. So these questions don't necessarily have a right or wrong answer, but it still requires them to show their knowledge and prove their point. And then the third option that I've used is creative writing. You present students with a creative writing prompt that's related to the unit, but also kind of opinion-based. For example, they can write a journal entry from the perspective of a specific person or a person living through this event, or from the perspective of a certain part of a cell or something like that. There are several different vocabulary review activities that I like to use. The most basic is just definitions. So you give students a list of vocabulary terms and have them write the definitions at this station. I would say no more than 5 to 10 words, especially if you're doing that 10 to 15 minute gap of time. Matching is where you just give students a list of vocabulary terms and have them match the terms. You can also use this with math and equations, so you can have the correct answers and then the equations that go with those answers. And again, no more than 10 to 15 words or equations. Of course, if you're doing this for math, you would have less equations than 10 to 15, but vocabulary you can use a little bit more on the matching. Another activity that I do with vocabulary when I do stations is two truths and a lie. So I give students a list of vocabulary words, no more than 10 to choose from, and they get to pick 3 of those words. And for each word, they're going to write 3 statements. 2 of the statements will be true and 1 will be false. So this is basically to show that your students understand the meaning of that word and can show what they know about it. And then when they're done, when there's maybe 2 minutes left at the station, you can let the other students try to determine which statement is a lie. And that'll kind of help you gauge how everyone is doing on the vocabulary, not just the student who wrote the statements. You have a lot of different options with creative activities, but these are the 2 that I like the most. With the Sketch It style activities, I give students just a blank box to draw in, and I give them a prompt and have them draw a scene based on the prompt. For me, it helps to add supplemental questions to the side where students explain their logic with the sketch. So that could just be, what's happening in this sketch? Why did you decide to include this in the sketch? Things like that. The other creative activity that I really like to include is something to do with impressions. So if I'm introducing a unit, this is really helpful. I find some sort of artifact to give students a first impression of the topic. So, for example, for our Renaissance unit, I chose the song Welcome to the Renaissance from the Broadway show Something Rotten. I printed out the lyrics to the song so they could follow along, and they listened to the song, and then they had to answer a few review questions asking them about their impressions of the time period based on the song. So they had to write down 3 impressions, and then they had to write 2 sentences telling me why they got that impression. I really like using opinion activities as well because you can kind of tie in the facts with the creative components. I like using would you rather style activities. So with these, you present students with different scenarios, like different living conditions, environments, social classes, time periods, and have them explain which they would rather be a part of or which they believe is the best or worst, so they can kind of show you their logic and what they think that topic is like. I also like problem-solving activities where I present students with a problem and ask them to come up with one or multiple solutions for the problem. That gets them to do a little bit of creative thinking, but also working on their problem-solving and critical thinking skills. Another type of activity that I use a lot is Would the World Be Different style activities. With these, I present students with a scenario and have them explain how they think the world would be different without that particular item or event or person. So, how would America be different if Benjamin Franklin wasn't part of our history? Things like that. That just gives them an opportunity to really think about that particular person or place or invention's impact on the world. There are a few other types of activities that I include sometimes, just really depending on what the topic is. I like to include brain breaks if it's a really just strenuous unit. So this can be something that has nothing to do with the topic, or it can have something to do with the topic. So I like Sudoku puzzles. You can make little ciphered messages and give them a key to decode the message. You can include a coloring section or a word scramble. This is just really something that lets your students decompress for a few minutes while they're learning. For math classes and science classes in particular, you could include practice problems. You can pull out problems that you saw students struggling with on the test or quiz and have them solve the problems and list out how they solved the problem. This can also help you see where they're struggling with solving that problem. For English, you can practice creating and breaking down citations. You can work on grammar and spelling. You can work on sentence structure, all sorts of different practice problems. Another thing that I really like to do is create word searches on websites like Discovery Education. And this, I just use vocabulary words from the unit and I include them in the puzzle. If you want to get really involved and do a little bit extra, you can add your own message to the puzzle, like a hidden message for your students to solve, by removing the unused letters from the puzzle and typing in your own letters that form a hidden question. If you need help learning how to do that, I'd be happy to help you. I create all of my stations pages in Google Slides, and that's just what's really easy for me to navigate. So things I always try to include on the stations cards are a little short introduction, maybe 2 or 3 sentences, instructions at the bottom that kind of sum up what they're going to be doing at this station, and then step-by-step instructions to walk them through everything that they need to do at that station. When you create answer sheets for these stations activities, they can be simple or they can be really complex, just depending on what you want to do. You can use Google Docs to create a really simple answer sheet. I usually use Google Slides because I like to get a little bit more creative with my answer sheet. And if you click on this page, there's a link to a template that you can use. Whenever I make my answer sheets, I try not to include the actual questions on the answer sheet to keep students from working ahead. I've noticed that if I give them too much information on the answer sheet, if they finish early at one station, they'll rush to try to start the next station and not necessarily give you as high quality of work as if they had spent more time at the station they're on. It doesn't have to be pretty, it just needs to be organized and really easy for your students to navigate. As always, thank you guys so much for listening. And if you have any questions or want to work on one of these projects together, just send me an email and we'll work out a time to get together. Thank you guys so much and have a great weekend.